Based on the arcade game of the same name, Punch-Out for the NES is significant in that it helped redefine what exactly a sports game can be. Unlike, say, Madden, where a proper understanding of the sport and the strategy employed in it would arguably help you play the game, Punch-Out does not require any knowledge of the sport. How Punch-Out pulls this off exactly I'll cover in the review portion, but first a little more background in hopes to clarify some possible confusion. There are actually 4 games all sharing the name Punch-Out. The original arcade game, a Game & Watch LCD game, one for the Nintendo Wii, and then the topic of today's review, NES Punch-Out. And now if that wasn't confusing enough, there are actually 3 variations of the NES version. One of which was a prize for the Gulf US Course Famicom tournament, another featuring Mike Tyson called Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and then Punch-Out featuring Mr. Dream. I'll look at this version simply because it's the easiest to obtain, as it's the version on Nintendo's Virtual Console service. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's take a look. The story of Punch-Out is perfectly simplistic. You're Little Mac, a 17-year-old from the Bronx who dreams of becoming the champion of one of the most beloved sports of all time. That's right, golf. Okay, not really, it's boxing, but the road to becoming a champion is wrought with rigorous training, personal hardships, and encounters with some of the most ethnically stereotypical opponents you're likely to see in a Nintendo game. Such as Glass Joe, a cowardly Frenchman, Von Kaiser, a warmongering German, and Soda Popinski, a Russian who really likes soda. Now, nothing may seem very immediately wrong with that last one, that is until you learn the Japanese name was Vodka Drunkinsky. Oh, how delightfully insensitive. Anyway, after you look past this subtle racism, you'll find that Punch-Out doesn't play like your usual boxing game. First, you'll observe that button mashing will usually not result in a hit, but will instead be blocked by your opponent, and the heart meter at the top of the screen will go down. And if it reaches 0, your character will turn purple and be unable to fight. This is one of the very clever penalties implemented in Punch-Out to complement its very unique fighting puzzler formula. Each opponent in the game has a specific set of pattern-based movements and attacks, which you must remember and avoid in order to deal some hits of your own. That's not to say there isn't any variation in the order of the attacks, just that within the fight there are detectable tells in repetitive behavior before attacks or strings of attacks. So from what I've said so far, Punch-Out might seem a very defensive game, and while the argument could be made that it is, I would tend to disagree, as Punch-Out greatly rewards offensive players as well. You may recall the star meter that was next to the heart meter at the top of the screen. You can get up to a maximum of 3 stars that allow you to perform the appropriately named Star Punch. How do you get these stars? Well, as I stated earlier, Punch-Out rewards its offensive players as well. If you hit an opponent during an opportune time, often during their tell or just an appropriate time when they're caught off guard, a star is awarded. For speedrunning, which this game lends itself very well to by the way, these can be indispensable. I suppose I should cover how to win a fight, and it's generally what you'd expect. Knock down the other guy 3 times for a TKO, or keep him on the mat for 10 seconds for a normal knockout. There is another less obvious way, which is by achieving a high enough score by the end of the 3rd round. What the desired score is not spelled out for you, so one of the other victory methods is usually what I go for. Let's depart from the gameplay now and take a look at the other element of the game which is very important. The atmosphere, which this game is simply seeping with. The big sprites, animations, and between-fight banter do a very good job of giving the characters distinctive personalities while still keeping the very minimalistic approach of the game. The color of the fighting stage also gives a certain amount of atmosphere, in particular, the feeling of progression. It's hard for me to explain how it does this necessarily, as I'm not a student of color theory, but let me guarantee you, the feeling is there. As I close, I would like to address a criticism I've heard of this game, that I actually found really interesting. And that is that essentially Punch-Out is a very static game. It's just fight after fight with very little break between them, and you don't really travel in the game. And to a point, I really agree with this. How cool would it have been if there was a Zelda-esque overworld between the fights, with shops, characters, and an expanded story? Very cool is the answer. But I implore you to look at Punch-Out from the time period as well as from the perspective of its genre, as it's essentially a puzzle game. Tetris, for example, was very big at the time, and utilized a single screen to keep the gameplay fast and simple, without breaking it up. So really, Punch-Out just suffers from the norms of the time, and should be judged looking through the appropriate spyglass. Today though, a new entry in the series could really benefit from some of these additions. And with that, I conclude my review of Punch-Out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.